Some people think monsters hide in the dark under beds in abandoned buildings in deep forests. They're wrong. The most dangerous monsters learn your name. They sit next to you. They smile at you. They earn your trust. Tonight, you're about to hear three true stories of people who met evil and lived long enough to tell us what it really looks like. Story 1. The man who almost took me the ocean was loud that night. The kind of sound that creeps into your head and fills the empty spaces with something heavy. Wind rolled across the parking lot in warm, salty waves, carrying the smell of gasoline, beer, grilled meat, and hot asphalt. Neon lights from the bar flickered against rows of chrome and steel. Motorcycles lined up like sleeping animals, their engines clicking softly as they cooled. Laughter rose and fell in uneven bursts, punctured by the low growl of revving engines and the distant hiss of the surf beyond the dunes. I was 6 years old. By all logic, I should not have been there. But I was. My father ran the beachside smokehouse, not just the kitchen but the events. Every Wednesday night the place filled with custom cars, and every Friday night the bikes took over. Those Fridays became my world. The bikers called me Little Star. They brought me candy and small toys. They let me sit on their tanks and beep their horns. They told me stories that felt bigger than life. They treated me like something precious in a place that was anything but gentle. And among them all, towering over the rest, was a man I called Uncle Ray. Ray was enormous, 6'7", maybe more, broad shoulders that made doorways seem too small. A scar ran from his temple down his jaw like something had tried, and failed to remove half his face. He rode a midnight black Harley and always smelled like tobacco and gasoline. Every single Friday for 5 years, he brought me the same two things: a chocolate bar and a tiny stuffed animal. 5 years of rituals build trust. The night everything broke, I was already asleep. Dad had inflated the air mattress behind the restaurant, just past the swinging kitchen doors where the noise dulled into a distant throb. He and Ray took turns checking on me while the bike show went on. The music was loud, the laughter louder, and the night pressed down with the kind of humidity that makes your skin feel sticky even in your dreams. I remember the exact moment I woke up, a hand on my shoulder. Not my father's, not Ray's. The room was dark except for thin strips of light leaking through the cracked door. The man standing over me smiled. He had a narrow face, thin lips, hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. He wore a plaid shirt and jeans. No leather. No patches, no colors. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly. "Your dad asked me to take you home." He knew my name. He knew my dad's name. He even knew the nickname everyone used for me. When you're 6 years old, that feels like proof. I clutched the stuffed flamingo Ray had given me earlier and slid off the mattress. The man, he said his name was Shane, held the door for me and led me through the back hallway, past the kitchen's warm light, out into the dark parking lot where the bikes gleamed under the floodlights. His car wasn't a bike. It was an old four-door sedan parked far from the crowd. The back seat was wrapped in plastic like a couch in a funeral home. At the time, I didn't understand what that meant. Now I do. He opened the door. I climbed in. The engine turned over, the car rolled forward, and that was when I saw Uncle Ray. He had just stepped outside the restaurant, maybe to check on me, maybe because something didn't feel right. Our eyes met through the windshield. I smiled and waved. Ray did not wave back. His face went blank, the kind of stillness that comes before violence. He didn't run to my father. He didn't shout. He didn't hesitate. He sprinted for his bike. The engine exploded to life. The sedan began to accelerate. I didn't know it yet, but every second of my life from that point forward would be divided into two parts, before that parking lot and after. The tires screamed. The old sedan lurched forward like it had been kicked by something invisible, the rear fishtailing slightly as Shane mashed the accelerator. I slid across the plastic seat, the flamingo clutched tight against my chest. The bike show blurred past the windows, chrome, leather, firelight, faces twisting in confusion. Then the roar of Uncle Ray's Harley split the night. It wasn't just loud. It was alive. The sound punched through the glass and into my bones. I twisted around in my seat and saw him. The headlight a single burning eye, the massive shape of him folded over the handlebars, his shoulders wider than the bike itself. He was gaining on us impossibly fast. Shane looked in the rearview mirror. His smile was gone. The road that led from the restaurant stretched long and straight, a mile and a half of asphalt boxed in by dunes and scrub brush before it bent toward the highway. No streetlights. No houses. Just wind and dark and the sound of engines tearing the night apart. Shane swerved. Ray corrected. Shane sped up. Ray sped up more. I felt the car shake as Shane's foot drove the gas pedal down harder. The speed made my stomach float. The windows rattled. The plastic seat crackled under me. The flamingo's button eyes stared into my face as if it already knew something I didn't. Ray was so close now I could see the scar on his face in the headlights glow. Then Shane slammed the brakes. The car skidded sideways and stopped in a cloud of dust and burning rubber. My body lurched forward. The seatbelt cut into my chest. Before I could speak, Shane twisted in his seat, his voice suddenly calm, too calm. "Get out of the car." My heart began pounding so hard it hurt. I said, "Get out." I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I threw open the door and ran. I didn't even make it 5 steps before I felt arms around me, massive, solid, shaking. Uncle Ray lifted me clean off the ground and crushed me against his chest. I could hear his heart hammering. He smelled like oil and sweat and smoke. Behind us, Shane's car spun out and tore down the road, disappearing into the dark. Ray didn't chase him. He didn't have to. The world had already changed. He put me on the back of his bike, wrapped his jacket around me, and roared back toward the restaurant where blue and red lights were already flooding the parking lot. Police cars. People screaming. My father on his knees in the gravel, his face broken open by something I wouldn't understand until years later. Everything after that came in pieces. Questions, flashing cameras, a sketch artist, a police station that smelled like coffee and fear. I didn't go home until after 2 in the morning, and for years the man named Shane was never found. But the bikers were. 8 years later, my father finally told me what happened after Ray brought me back. The entire bike show emptied, not because of the police, because they went hunting. They had the description, they had the plate, they had the roads. My father paused for a long time when he told me that part. "They found him," he said. "He never told me where, he never told me how. He didn't have to. Some endings don't belong to courts or paperwork, some belong to the dark." I didn't understand the weight of what happened that night until years later, when childhood finally loosened its grip on my memories and let the truth breathe. At 6 years old, I only knew that I had almost gone home with the wrong man. At 14, my father sat me down at the kitchen table one evening. The house was quiet. No television, no music, just the refrigerator humming like it was afraid to interrupt what he was about to say. He didn't look at me at first. "Do you remember the bike nights?" he asked. I nodded. "Do you remember the man, Shane?" The name tasted strange in my mouth, like it didn't belong to anything real. He told me then. Shane had been coming to the restaurant for months before that night, always sitting at the same corner table, always watching. He knew my nickname. He knew my father's schedule. He knew when I fell asleep. He knew how often Ray and my dad checked on me. He had planned it. The car, the timing, the words, everything. And when Ray ripped me out of his trap, the bikers didn't stay for the police. They took the night. Ray described the car. Someone recognized the man. Another recognized the bar he drank at. Another recognized the kind of person he was. And somewhere beyond the edge of town, far from the lights and the law, the world corrected itself. My father's voice cracked when he told me. He didn't say what they did. He didn't need to, because some monsters are dealt with by other monsters. And sometimes that is mercy. I still keep the flamingo beanie baby in a box in my closet. Its fur is faded. One eye is loose, but it reminds me of the exact second when everything that could have happened didn't. Story 2. The Eye Behind the Wall, February 2017. was the month I stopped believing that locked doors meant safety. I was a residential advisor at a small liberal arts college, responsible for one of the campus houses. Dozens of students, dozens of secrets, dozens of rooms where people believed they were alone. I came home from dance rehearsal late one night, exhausted and half frozen. I showered, changed, straightened a poster on my wall, then I reached into my hair-bow drawer and found the box, small, black, taped into the corner. At first I thought it was an ant trap, then I peeled the tape back. A red light blinked at me. The world dropped. I was holding a camera. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The little red light pulsed against my thumb like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me. I turned the device over and found the tiny engraved letters. The make, the model, proof that it wasn't some forgotten piece of maintenance equipment, proof that someone had placed an eye inside my room and pointed it at my life. I ran down the hall barefoot and slammed on my friend's door. They didn't even ask why I was crying. We locked ourselves inside and stared at the camera like it might grow teeth. There was an SD card inside. The next day, we pulled the footage in the library. I wish I hadn't. Hours of video scrolled across the screen, me sleeping, me changing, me sitting on my bed scrolling through my phone. Other girls in other rooms, bathrooms, showers, private moments that were never supposed to belong to anyone but themselves. Then we found the clip that broke something inside me forever. The person who planted the camera had recorded himself doing it. He didn't know he'd left that file behind. I did. He was another Ra. A guy I had laughed with in staff meetings. A guy I had trusted with keys. I called my supervisor and said I needed to see him immediately. By evening, campus police were involved. City police followed. Questions blurred together until the room felt like it was spinning. They detained him that night, locked him inside an empty dorm suite while they figured out what to do. I didn't sleep. I kept imagining the click of the door handle, the slow turn of the knob, the face from the video standing at the foot of my bed. The next morning, campus police called again. They told me what he had admitted. It had started with recording himself during sex. Then he escalated, bathrooms, bedrooms, at least 7 victims. They arrested him. The school tried to keep it quiet. They told me not to tell anyone. Said it was to preserve his dignity. I laughed until I started crying. Months later, he was expelled. A year after that, I received a restraining order in the mail. I still check the corners of every room I enter. Because once you learn how thin privacy really is, it never comes back. Now here is story 3. I met Hannah in the fall of my senior year of high school, and I didn't understand then that some people don't enter your life, they infect it. She had transferred from a Catholic school halfway through the year, which was strange enough on its own, but what made her unforgettable was the way she looked at people. Not with curiosity, not with kindness, with assessment, like she was calculating what each person could be used for. She told me she'd been expelled after a fight over a boy. She said the other girl had lied. She said the restraining order was unfair. She said she'd never hurt anyone. At the time, I believed her. Everyone believes them at first. Years passed. College happened. Then distance. Then adulthood. And like a bad memory you never expect to come back, Hannah returned, same voice, same laugh, same strange gravity. That summer, I finally learned what she had done. We were sitting in her childhood bedroom, the air heavy with heat and something unspoken, when she pulled 3 books from her closet and laid them on the bed between us like weapons. One of them was about revenge. One of them was about manipulation. And the third had a cartoon on the cover and a single word in thick letters: gaslighting. She told me how she destroyed another girl in high school. How she convinced a boy to pretend to be someone else on the phone. How she planted notes in lockers. How she whispered into a cassette tape, "You should die, you should disappear," between the songs. She smiled while she told me. And then she told me how the girl finally broke. How the girl's parents confronted the wrong boy. How the school whispered about how crazy she was. How Hannah had almost pushed her down a stairwell, not almost by accident, almost by design. I sat there listening to this like someone hearing the ocean from inside a coffin. She wasn't ashamed. She was proud. And the worst part, she was just getting started. By the time I left her bedroom that day, something in me already knew that Hannah was not just dangerous, she was inevitable. A year later, she was living back with her parents. No degree, no friends, no stability. She called me constantly. She hated one girl named Kelly with an obsession that made my skin crawl. She hated Kelly's boyfriend, Dan, even more. According to Hannah, Kelly was using him, hurting him, destroying him. According to Hannah, she was the only one who truly understood him. One night, I drove past Hannah's house and saw police lights outside. The next day, she told me Kelly had accused her of something terrible, said it was an accident, said she'd only been high, said Kelly was exaggerating. A week later, the truth surfaced. Hannah had lured Kelly to a cliff overlook, 100 feet straight down. Kelly said Hannah grabbed her and tried to throw her off. Hannah said she only slipped and reached out to steady herself. Kelly never spoke to her again. Most people drifted away. I didn't. And I will regret that for the rest of my life. In 1998, Hannah moved to Minneapolis. She called me a year later. She was doing great. She was in love. She had met the man she would marry. His name was Dan, the same Dan. The coincidence made my stomach turn. She laughed it off, said Dan was a common name. Then she introduced me to heroin, not directly but through stories, through how controlled it was, how beautiful, how it made the world stop hurting. When she visited me in 2000, she bought a new cell phone and listed Dan as the primary user. Then she left her curling iron at my house. I called her new number to surprise her. Dan's voice answered the machine. The same Dan. I said nothing. She called me minutes later and said she had run into a guy named Dan and gave him the phone. Too many coincidences. A few months later, she came back. The drugs were no longer subtle. The obsession was no longer hidden. She said Dan had moved to Chicago. Said his ex-girlfriend was stalking him. Said the girl had overdosed and tried to kill herself because of Hannah. Hannah said they had to keep their relationship secret. I told her to leave my house. A year passed. Then her mother called. Hannah had nearly killed someone in Minneapolis. They wanted me to go back with her. I did. And that is where the real story begins. We reached Minneapolis just after sunset, the sky the color of old bruises, the city breathing cold through the cracked windows. Hannah barely spoke on the drive. Her hands gripped the steering wheel too hard, knuckles pale, eyes darting at every passing reflection in the glass. The woman we were staying with, one of Hannah's former roommates, met us at the door with a face already full of history and fear. We didn't unpack. We sat at the kitchen table instead, and that's when the truth surfaced. The other roommate, the one Hannah had almost killed, had been there. She had seen everything. The night in question wasn't an accident. It was a plan. An old friend from Indiana had come to Minneapolis to start over after a breakup with Dan. She was vulnerable, lost, trusting. She didn't know about Hannah's addiction. She didn't know about the stories. She didn't know about the fantasies. Hannah encouraged her to try heroin, promised it would be safe, promised it would be small. It wasn't. The girl collapsed, stopped breathing. The room went quiet in a way that no room ever should. Instead of calling for help, Hannah moved to the other roommate with another dose, smiling, pretending nothing was wrong. The second girl refused. She went to check on the first and realized she wasn't breathing at all. She ran for the phone. Hannah tried to stop her. Paramedics arrived in time. Barely. The girl lived. Hannah was arrested. The charges faded into probation and rehab and silence. I sat at that table as the city hummed outside, realizing the person I thought I knew had been standing in the dark the entire time, waiting for someone to step close enough. Hannah told me it was a misunderstanding, a hallucination, a bad moment. She said she'd never meant to hurt anyone. But when the roommate finished speaking, I finally understood. Hannah's obsession with Dan had never ended. She had built an entire invisible world around him. Secret messages, secret phones, secret connections that only existed in her mind. Anyone who stood between that world and reality became a problem. And problems in Hannah's universe had solutions. We left Minneapolis 2 days later. The city's lights vanished behind us like something being buried. I thought I was finally free. I was wrong. Back in Indiana, life tried to pretend it was normal. Hannah returned to Atlanta. I returned to classes. Weeks passed. Then she called. She wanted to visit. I hesitated. Then I agreed. When she arrived at my apartment, the first thing she asked wasn't how I was. It was whether I had told anyone she was coming. Her voice was thin, her smile too tight. She reached into her purse and pulled out a revolver, purple and black, small, real. I froze. She said she had it for protection. She said she was back on drugs. She said she wanted to show me something, but then changed her mind, locked it in her car, and decided to leave early. A few weeks later, she appeared at my door again. 8 hours of driving. No warning. She had one hand inside her purse when I opened the door. She saw I was on the phone and turned away. She was shaking. Inside, she told me about another man, a musician, a new obsession. She wanted to know how I had made Dan fall for me. She wanted the formula, the secret, the spell. I told her there was none. She didn't believe me. That night she cried, drank, and drove away in the dark. After that, the phone calls began. Anonymous numbers, three-way calls, voices screaming at me about what I'd done to Dan, threats, disconnected lines. When I finally reached Hannah, she accused me of destroying him, of stealing him from her, of making him forget who he truly loved. She said Dan was her secret boyfriend. She said everyone else was pretending. She said I was trying to kill him by keeping him from her. Her voice was no longer human. I told her to never contact me again. She didn't listen. After I hung up on Hannah, I sat in my kitchen staring at the wall until the sky outside went black. My phone lay face down on the table, as if it might start speaking on its own. Every instinct in me screamed that I had just stepped into something I could never step back out of. I called the number I had for Dan. It was disconnected. Then I remembered the old phone, the one Hannah had bought years earlier, the one she had claimed she gave away. I found the number in my address book. I dialed it. My own voice answered the machine. The recording was unmistakably me. My words, my tone, my pauses. Hannah had recorded my voicemail and used it to impersonate me. Everything snapped into place. Dan had been calling her. She had been answering as me. She had been feeding his messages back into her fantasy. She had been controlling the entire story from both sides. There was never a relationship. There was only Hannah, the overdose in Minneapolis, the cell phone, the fake messages, the lies, the obsessions, the threats. All of it was part of the same sickness. The next day Hannah showed up at my apartment screaming. I refused to open the door. She told me Dan had killed himself. Then she left. I never saw her again. I changed my number. I moved. I erased every bridge that might lead back to me. The last I heard, Hannah was stalking another man in Atlanta. Somewhere out there, she is still building invisible worlds. And somewhere out there, someone is standing at the center of one of them, not yet knowing what has already chosen them. As some people grow up believing monsters live in shadows, under beds, in forests, or behind locked doors. They're wrong. The most dangerous monsters are the ones who learn your name, the ones who watch you smile, the ones who earn your trust, the ones who sit at your table and tell you stories about themselves that feel almost normal. The man in the parking lot knew my name. The man behind the camera laughed with me at staff meetings. Hannah cried on my shoulder and called me her friend. None of them looked like monsters. That's the lesson that never leaves you. Because when you finally realize what evil actually looks like, the world becomes a quieter place. Not safer, just quieter. You learn how to listen to the spaces between words. You learn how to recognize when a smile doesn't reach the eyes. You learn how to walk away before the door closes. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you survive long enough to tell the story. But the world doesn't change because you survived. Somewhere a child is being watched. Somewhere a door is being unlocked. Somewhere a voice is being imitated on a phone. Somewhere, a person is being chosen. And the darkness isn't waiting in the woods. It's waiting in the room with you.